What's up, y'all? It is Pigeon Pirate back with another MSI Preview video, and today we're going to be talking about CB Lowell's paiN Gaming from Brazil. And so let's just jump right into it. Their top laner is Robo, jungler is Carriot, mid laner is Tinouns, their bottom laner is BRTT, and their support is Lucy. And these guys are coached by Coach Nova. So, a little bit of history for them because some of you may be familiar with some of either the players' names or with the organization's name itself. And that's because they're back on the world stage for the first time since 2015. They were the Brazilian team at Worlds in 2015, and they were the first ever team from one of these emerging regions at Worlds to win more than just one game. In fact, they were incredibly close to going 2-0 against Flash Wolves that made it out of the groups in that initial pool play for Worlds 2015. And so they were just a hair away from actually qualifying into the knockout stage of Worlds in 2015. And so it's really the amazing play of paiN Gaming during that 2015 Worlds that set the stage for what these emerging regions can really do. And they're what gave teams like Gambit Gaming or other organizations that had a lot of international success to really rise up and challenge these major regions for dominance. And so a lot of history comes into them, and so it's really fun to see this organization back onto the world stage. Um, However, while doing my research for this video, it turns out that this is one of the harder teams to actually pin down as to what their play style is, how good they actually are, and whether or not they're going to make a legitimate splash come MSI here in 2021. So, a little bit about their season here is they actually finished fifth in their league after the regular season with a record of 11 and 7, and they were tied at 11 and 7 with another team called Loud. But their head-to-head record against Loud was 0 and 2. So Loud got the fourth seed, and paiN Gaming got the fifth seed. So the way that the playoffs work in CBLOL is it's a typical single elimination 16 bracket, meaning that the bottom four seeds will play each other in the quarterfinals. Winners will then play the first and the second seed in the semifinals, and the winner of those will ultimately play each other in the finals to see who's going to be the representative of their region. And so with paiN Gaming coming in at the fifth seed, they were going to have to come up against Loud Gaming, who they had an 0-2 record against in that uh, very first matchup going in. However, one of the things that paiN Gaming had on their side, even though they were 0-2 against Loud, is they were starting to surge and come together at the right time. They finished season 8 and season 9, the last 2 weeks of or week 8 and week 9, the last 2 weeks of the season on a 4-0 win streak, in which they beat both the number one seed as well as Kaboom, which was another playoff team. So these guys were coming together and really starting to catch fire at the perfect time going into playoffs. So that sets the stage. And in that first round of the playoffs against Loud, they ended up winning that series in a really close matchup, winning it 3-2. So since they won that, they were then advanced and had to play the number one seed, which was Flamengo Esports. And against Flamengo Esports, again, won another really close series, 3-2, to advance to the finals, in which they played Vortex. And Vortex, they were the number two seed, and most people would probably have picked them as the favorites to win it, even though paiN is the more popular team in the region. You can look at the Twitter polls during that finals. A lot of the guys in the region were rooting for paiN Gaming to win, and they ultimately did end up winning in a 3-1 matchup. But even though it was only 3-1, it was an incredibly close series. Every single one of those games was came down to the wire, came down to really intense team fights, and was a really fun series to watch. So, if you're willing to put in some time and don't mind listening to some Portuguese, if you don't speak it, I would highly recommend watching those finals because they're a lot of fun. Um, so, with all that, winning 3-1 against Vortex, they are once again birthed into the international scene and have the opportunity to represent Brazil here at upcoming MSI. So, before I usually in these videos, what I like to do is talk about what makes the team good and then highlight specific players within that. But for this one around, I'm actually going to talk about the players first because I think it's the players that dictate how the team operates and why it kind of made it to where it's going, if that makes sense. And the real reason for this is because paiN Gaming is made up of a lot of really good veteran players within the Brazilian scene. So first and foremost, you look at Robo, who's a veteran top laner since 2014. This guy has been to Worlds in 2019 on Flamengo Esports, as well as represented Brazil at MSI in 2017. He's been to the Brazilian finals, I think either 10 or 11 times. And this is a guy that is consistently been one of the best top laners in Brazil for a really long time. And so he obviously has been around the bend and knows what he's doing and can play a multitude of champions from carries to tanks. And so is BRTT. In fact, a lot of people are probably really familiar with that name because back in Worlds of 2015, he was on the paiN Gaming team that made the big splash, and he was really the face and the energy behind it. He used to be known as the best Draven in the entire world, and he had an attitude to match it. He's kind of similar to a Tyler 1 type character, where he's just high energy, a lot of fun, screaming, hyping up his teammates covered in tattoos, really just rose to stardom because of the really fun personality that he brought to League of Legends, but also an incredibly aggressive and high flying game style that was a lot of fun to watch. And this guy has been around the bend too. You know, he's been a pro since 2012. He was in Worlds at 2015 and 2019 with Flamengo, a teammate of Robo's in 2019, as well as a teammate of Robo's in their MSI showing in 2017 as well, and he's got the most CB LOL championships out of any player in the entire Brazilian league. This guy is the equivalent of Double Lift or Bjergsen in the CB LOL. He's an absolute superstar and has showing no signs of slowing down. Uh, Look at their support. His name is Lucy. He's been a veteran since 2016. He actually came over from Korea back in 2018. He too joined BRTT and Robo in their Worlds run in 2019 with Flamengo Esports, and he's really the newest addition to this team. He joined them for this specific spring split and has been a fantastic addition and been fitting in really well with the team. Tinones, he's another veteran, been around since 2012, and this guy has been an absolute superstar for them. I'll talk about him more once I'm actually highlighting what makes this team so great. But he's been around the block. He's another person that made it to Worlds back in 2014, and has been playing with these guys since the summer split of 2020, so last year. And then Karyok, the jungler, he's the newest member of the team. He finally made his professional debut in the summer of 2020, working with this same paiN Gaming team in the same roster, everyone except for Lucy. Uh, and prior to that, he started playing competitively in 2018, but for some of the more minor teams in the uh, academy-esque regions within Brazil. So he's a newer person, but has really learned and carried his weight, and has been someone who can show that he can show up big in big time games, as I'll talk a little bit more about his experience in the playoffs. So one of the things that makes this team so hard to pin down is they're a team full of veterans, so people that really know how to play the game and play it at a high level. Yet they seemed not to come together for a really long time, which is actually pretty typical. If you think of some of the best teams in other regions, when you're taking star talents and shoving them together into these so-called super teams, sometimes they have a hard time adjusting. And this is not just uh, something that happens in esports. This is something that happens in regular sports as well, right? You put together James Harden and Russell Westbrook and Houston together to play for the Rockets. And you see that at the beginning of the season, they look like an absolutely god awful team, a team that could barely make the playoffs. And then all of a sudden they go on this spurt towards the later half of the season where they're winning, 20 out of 26 games and look absolutely unstoppable together. So it takes time when veteran players that are really adjusted and know how to play the game, but play to a specific way and a specific level to come together and create a new cohesive way to play together. And I think that's really what happened with paiN Gaming, and it's something that they're still continuing to learn as they continue to grow together. And I think the best way to highlight that is by showing what their regular season statistics were in comparison to their playoff statistics. So, in the regular season, they had the shortest game time out of any of the teams in the CB LOL. They had the second best kill death ratio, and they had the highest combined kills per minute. And this is really led because of a fantastic early game that they would have, where they were the second best early game rating team and had the best goal difference at 15. So these obviously veterans were able to get really good control over their lanes and over the jungle, but then fell apart when it came to late game decision making, likely because all of them had different ideas on how to play the game and what they should be doing and certain objectives to take, which leads to why they were the sixth best mid to late game rating, and they actually had a negative mid to late game rating at negative 1.7. So they would oftentimes get these big gold leads and then couldn't transition them to actual wins. And another telling stat as to why that is they had really average warding stats throughout the entirety of the regular season. So it just seems like it was a team full of individuals that weren't able to then come together in a cohesive manner later on. However, come the playoffs, that starts to turn around. All of a sudden, the team with the shortest game time now had the second longest game time. They still maintained their best early game, being the best early game team in the playoffs and having the best goal differential again. But all of a sudden now they became the third best mid to late game rating and had a positive 1.1. So this isn't like a mind blowing, oh my gosh, they're absolutely smashing people in the mid to late game. No, but this is a team that's saying, okay, they can win the early game, and now all of a sudden they're not going to throw it anymore, or at least throw it to nearly the same degree that they used to be doing. So it's a really positive sign in showing that these veteran players are starting to come together and realize who they want to be and what their identity as a team actually is. And so, a huge way to see that, another really good telling stat, is all of a sudden they became the best warding team in the playoffs. So now, all of a sudden, they go from this team that can't decide what to do and what decisions to make in the mid to late game to coming together, understanding that they're a greater team and how to play off of one another, and how to set up properly for objectives. So they're no longer just allowing teams to sneak things away from them or picking these team fights that ultimately they weren't ready for to begin with. So, why then ultimately are they a team that is qualified to go to MSI? Well, it's really because they are these veteran teams, but they can play a multitude of different styles. All of these different players have been around for such a long time and through so many different metas that they understand what it takes to just win games flat out. And so if you ask BRTT to play a really late game champion like Jinx, where he carried some of the most exciting team fights in those final matchups, uh, completely on his own in the late game, he's able to do that. But if you also ask him to play a really early game champion and try to smash lane like Draven, he's willing to take on that risk as well. Robo does the exact same thing in top lane, being able to play both tanks and carry champions. You see him going for outplays on Gnar, but also being willing to play Maokai as his third most champion played in his career ever. So he's really able to do anything the team needs. And finally, Tenowns, their mid laner, he got second in MVP voting in the league for a reason. This guy is so consistently good at being able to just put out insane damage later on in the games and get picks, but also just team fight incredibly, incredibly well. In those finals matchups against Vortex, seeing his Zoe games or his Vel'Koz games, he's able to position himself incredibly well, understand what the team around him is doing, and then just be able to dish out an insane amount of damage that really helps his team carry and ultimately win the team fights that can win them the game. And so, all of these players, know how to play the game, know how to get these big advantages for themselves, and are finally starting to figure out what it takes to come together as a team and push their advantages to win a game as opposed to just throwing it in the later game. And so ultimately, what does this mean for predictions? I actually have kind of a positive outlook on these guys. So, out of all the Pool D teams, being Detonation Focus Me, Pentanet.gg, and now paiN Gaming, I actually have the most confidence that paiN Gaming will win a couple games. I actually don't think, just because of the pool that they're in, but also because of their veteran status and their ability to show up big and when it matters the most. I have a lot of confidence that they're not going to leave completely empty-handed. I do think they are going to get at least one, possibly two wins. And if any team from Pool D is going to make a run to make it into that Rumble stage, I do think it's going to be these guys. So I would not be surprised at all if they make it out. I don't know if I'm going to be picking it yet. I'm probably going to release a pick'ems result for MSI later at the week or right before MSI actually starts. So stay tuned for that. But I do think these guys are going to make a splash, and they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. So if you think I'm right, think I'm wrong, think I'm an idiot, please just let me know in the comments below. And thanks again so much for watching. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to be starting on the Pool C teams, starting with Istanbul. So please give those a watch, and thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Bye.